Hi, I'm Hayes Jackson. I'm the director here at Longleaf Botanical Gardens. I'm also the Alabama Cooperative Extension urban horticulturist stationed here at the gardens. And today I'm going to show you a little bit of some of the plantings we have around the Longleaf Event Center. So we're up here at this used to be an old city facility, the Linlock Community Center. It's been turned into an event center now where we host weddings and we have different events, but we've also expanded the landscape to include some pretty cool things. We've got a rosemary collection planted out front. I'm going to show you these things today, some varieties of rosemary that are good for central Alabama. You can see we have some good other color displays. We've planted these zinnias out. They've been great for the pollinators. I'm going to show you some of the unique plants that are out front. Then we'll go to the back area where we have the rotary garden, which is a sensory garden, which are plants that are great for smell, for texture, and look at some of the things planted there. Then we'll tour the tropical cascade garden, which has a lot of tropical perennials that look their best during the season when a lot of plants are really tired. So come midsummer to late fall, when a lot of plants are tired out in central Alabama, these plants will really put on a show. They'll also look at the edible garden, where we've got a collection of different edible things, including stone pine and a great collection of ornamental bananas. So join me and we'll take a tour today of these gardens. I'm standing in the middle of our rosemary demonstration garden. It's kind of a synoptic collection, and that means I've just got one plant of each variety, and we kind of get an idea of the shape and how it grows, how it tolerates our winters, how it does in our summers. We've got about 10 varieties here, and some of them are upright and growing. We've got some that grow kind of flat. I've got pink flower, and I've got some that kind of spread. So we've got several varieties, and we love to plant rosemary. One, you can use it for cooking. Two, it's a tough, drought-tolerant plant. It needs to be utilized more in the landscape. It makes a great foundation plant. Tolerating a hot brick wall or something that's really hot and dry. It really tolerates those climates, and they love to bloom. So we get these blooms, especially during the winter season. It's nice to have some color, but they tend to bloom a good portion of the season here. So we've got a unique collection of different varieties. I've also included an olive tree in our collection. This is all drought tolerant stuff, but we're really taking a look at these different types of rosemary and how they perform in central Alabama. We can also propagate from these, and so the ones that do perform better, we can offer those in our plant sales in the spring and propagate from the plants and know that they do well in our climate. So if you like rosemary, include it in your garden because it's a great plant for central Alabama. Just give it some full sun and good drainage. This is another great plant for central Alabama. This is Malvaviscus Drummondii variety Big Mama, and I love the name. And the Big Mama refers to, it's a larger growing plant, has larger blooms than the typical. We call this Turk's cap. It's native kind of down on the Gulf Coast and more so as you get toward Texas, but it's perfectly at home here in central Alabama. As you can see, this time of year the plant is absolutely covered in these neon reddish hibiscus flowers. It's related to hibiscus, but they also call it sleepy mallow because it doesn't quite open fully. So it looks like the flowers are still opening, but that's the way they're supposed to be in the landscape. Now, one thing I like about this plant, it loves to feed the hummingbirds and the pollinators and things like the sulfur butterflies. If I wasn't standing here right now, there'd be a cloud of butterflies coming in and pollinating. But this is a great plant because it's drought tolerant. I see very few pests, and it will take sun or shade. I think it blooms better in some sun. So we put it out in sun. We've got a nice mass of it growing here in front of the event hall, and it really adds about midsummer till frost. We get this brilliant display of these blooms that are just so bright and cheery with that neon red color. One of the things we grow here at Longleaf, and I think most people really enjoy having in their garden, are Japanese maples. And we have several varieties. We're growing them in the sensory garden because they give such a great texture with the different leaf shapes. They also can have decorative bark. awesome forms that are either weeping or pendulous varieties. There are just so many varieties of Japanese maples. We have several that are potted in the front of the building, and then we have them and it's kind of featured in the beds in our sensory garden as well. So if you're a fan of Japanese maples and enjoy seeing some different varieties, we've got a nice small collection and look forward to adding more as the garden grows. Here we have this marvelous sago growing at the entrance of the gardens, and sago palms are more typical of Zone 9, which is along the coast. But in Alabama, we can actually grow these, especially in a protected spot as you go on up into central Alabama. We have this one is a male, and it's really interesting. They call these sago palms, but in reality, they are an ancient plant that we call a cycad, and they're actually more closely related to pine trees. And the male will have a big cone, and then the female has a receptive cone, and what I will do is cut the male cone off and pollinate our female, which is growing down in the courtyard garden at the Anniston Museum, and we will have seeds. We collect the seeds and are able to grow these for our nursery and our plant sale. This sago here now, in a cold winter, we can have foliage damage. Anytime it gets below 20 and that sun hits that foliage, it will often burn the foliage, but they will put back out a whole new crown as the weather warms. And we had some severe winters a few years ago where we talk about the polar vortex, and I really thought it would really wipe the sagos out in Anniston. There's quite a few of these planted around, but most survived. They just defoliated and they came back. So if you plant these, I always plant them maybe against a building on the west side or on the east side or the south side, just to avoid those north exposures. And you can always throw a blanket over them if it's going to go below 20. We don't get too many nights below 20. And I've even been known to put a few Christmas lights on some of my plants just to give them that extra few degrees. But this one has really done well at the entrance and really makes a statement when it's got these nice green leaves, but they do have a few spines, but a great looking plant. Here we are in the sensory garden. This is located in the back of the Longleaf Event Center, and this was created by the Rotary Club of Anniston, and it was one of the first gardens that we installed, and the Rotary Garden raised the money, provided the labor, and we've got these raised beds that are accessible to children and any visitors that want to get up and close to the plants, so where they can see the textures, they can feel the plants. We encourage touching the plants. We've got things in the garden that smell great and things that don't. So we hope it tickles your senses. But in this sensory garden, we've got a wonderful collection of plants. And when I look down here, I see we've got society garlic, which is a garlic relative. It's not the true edible garlic. But you take one of those leaves and you smell it, and it has that pungent smell of garlic. And I always get the kids to smell that, and most of them do not like it. It is strong. But it produces these nice little purple blooms on top of these evergreen, I won't say, if we get a hard freeze, it'll die down a little bit, but these nice clumps of foliage. And then behind it, we've got some Nandino. These are Gulfstream, which is a variety that doesn't set seed. We know Nandina can be an issue in gardens of the standard species where it can spread and become invasive. But this one doesn't set seed, and I love the texture on that. The texture of the leaves is what really draws me toward Nandina. It's got the really fine, they call it almost like a bamboo leaf texture. And then we're standing in front of one of the trees that is famous across the South. This is Southern Magnolia, but this is a variety called Teddy Bear. And Teddy Bear is known for that fuzzy brown back of the leaf. It's a dwarf variety, and when you get up with Teddy Bear and you touch that brown, you can feel how soft and velvety that is. So we like to tell people to touch the underside of that leaf and see how that is. But let's walk around the garden and we'll look at a few things that excite the senses when you're outside, and take a look at some of the plants we're growing here in the sensory garden. Here we're looking at Serenoa, the saw palmetto, and this is the native palm that grows all along the Gulf Coast from the very edge of Louisiana all the way back to southern South Carolina. And the interesting thing about this is the palm that provides the fruit that is saw palmetto, which has become medicinal. And if you guys have heard of saw palmetto, it's supposed to help your prostate. But we're growing it for another reason. The reason we're growing it is the spiky, bold texture of the foliage, and it is a great palm for dry, sunny areas. You'll usually see it growing on the sand dunes or underneath the longleaf pines down on the far south of the coastal plain of Alabama, but we grow it this far north and it does well. There's a green form and a blue form, and you'll find them any shade in between, and this was one that's kind of in between. It's a little bluish green. But we've offset it, if you look below it, is Santolina. And Santolina is an herb that is used, it's kind of aromatic. It's not real common in the landscape. You don't see it sold too much in Alabama, but it's very drought tolerant. And it will produce these little pin-like pinheads of yellow flowers in the spring. And it needs good drainage, but I love the soft, fluffy texture of the foliage. This is one we'd like people to touch too. And it is aromatic, so it will give a nice, almost like a wormwood smell on your hands once you touch the foliage. But we've got Serenoa repens, the saw palmetto, and Santolina, and which is a nice, and I think probably would need cutting back. I'd call it an evergreen perennial, but great for rock gardens. Here we have another plant combination. This is Harry Lauder's walking stick, which is a wonderful plant in the landscape, and I actually think it makes a better specimen in the wintertime because of those curly contorted branches. This is a hazelnut, and it can get a few feet larger than this, but it is a plant that is probably needs a little bit of afternoon shade in Alabama, but we've got it out here in full sun, but we've got it on a timer with some irrigation. And if you look below it, you've got these Setcreasea, the purple heart. This is a hybrid one that has really rubbery kind of feeling leaves, and I love when the kids touch the leaves. It almost will squeak like rubber. So we've got this purple heart ground cover and Harry Lauder's walking stick. Both make an interesting plant, one for touch and the other for the texture of the curly contorted limbs, especially in the winter. Looking here, we have a Japanese maple called Germain's gyration, and it gets its name from the way the limbs are contorted, and it tends to grow more wider than tall. A great texture in the winter to see that limb structure, and a great texture of leaves in the spring and summer, and of course a little bit of fall color in the fall. And below it we have Salvia gregii. As you can see, a butterfly taking notice of the flowers. This is a drought-tolerant perennial or woody salvia species that is utilized often in xeriscaping, but in this situation we have it in a raised bed, and where we are using it for a great color. And color is one of the things that excites us in the garden, and this plant will bloom almost year-round. It will take a break in the wintertime when it's a little bit cooler. But we have Salvia gregii. It's called the Texas sage, or a lot of times Greg salvia, and it will also come in numerous colors from white to yellow to red to pink, and a combination I love. There's a variety called Hot Lips, which is red and white. But we have several of these growing in the gardens around, and they're a wonderful plant for color, especially this time of the year in the fall, and great to attracting some of your pollinators, including hummingbirds and a lot of different butterflies. Here we have a trio of plants that will excite all the senses. We've got, starting, if we look low, we've got a dianthus, and this dianthus is a ground cover, will produce a flower in the spring that is fragrant, so we get fragrance from the blooms. It's also called pinks. We also get that wonderful grass-like texture of the foliage, And as you see above that, we have the pink Muhly grass. This is Muhlenbergia. This is an incredible grass, and I'm not a big fan of a lot of the ornamental grasses because sometimes they tend to get a little floppy and we get a good thunderstorm or a good rain in the summer and they lose their shape. Not this one. And this one really puts on a show this time of year with those almost pink cotton candy like blooms that are airy, that the sun really shines through. It's a wonderful effect. And it will also come in a white. There's a white cloud form of pink Muhly, but this is the pink form. This is a native grass to the southeast, and I'm seeing it gain a lot of popularity in the landscapes. But pink Muhly grass, and I think it actually looks better in masses when you do big sweeps of it, but we have kind of limited space in this garden, but I want to include it for the texture of those blooms as they occur this time of the season in fall. Now, the shrub next to the Muhly grass is summer sweet, or Clethra, which is a native shrub that produces summer blooms that are highly fragrant. And we're past the season of bloom, and you're seeing the fruit set where all the blooms were this summer. But Clethra alnifolia is a wonderful native plant. It will grow in wet or dry areas. This is a little dry and sunny out here. There's several name selections that are can be smaller in form or pink in flower. The flower is typically white, but Clethra is another great native plant that's underutilized, but it does sucker, so give it a little bit of room. We do have to remove these suckers, but that allows us to propagate the plant and have it available in our plant sales. So we've got summer sweet Clethra, pink Muhly grass, and dianthus or pinks growing in this bed. Now we're looking at this bed, which has got a incredible pink hydrangea, but problem is they bloom in the spring, but you get these wonderful dried flower heads in the fall, and as we go in, I like to leave those. I love the texture that they have. And you can see that the dried flowers will hang on for a good long time. You can also come back and cut these back if you want to, but I like to leave them. I think they give a nice fall look to the garden. But the nicest plant in this bed is this Bihu Japanese maple. And this is a maple that, if you've heard of coral bark that has kind of the reddish coral bark, this is a yellow barked maple. And it really shines in the wintertime. And of course the leaves, to me it's one of the first Japanese maples to color. It will drop those leaves. Of course, we've had a lot of wind with the recent hurricane here, and it took a lot of the leaves off. So now you can really see that bark. So we've got that yellow bark, and it gets a little bit of a tinge of orange. So if you want a good winter interest maple, Bihu, it's Japanese maple variety Bihu. And if we'll move over here, we'll see a little dwarf lamb's ear that has little tiny foliage. And lamb's ear is one of the best plants for texture. We're here in the sensory garden. I love when people touch it, it feels like a puppy's ear. And it has that velvety leaf that is really interesting to the touch. But it is a little tough to grow in Alabama. We get a lot of rainfall. It likes good drainage, but we've got it in a raised bed, and it seemed to do quite well here. Tea olive has got to be one of my favorite shrubs. It's an evergreen. It has the most fragrant flowers. Even though the flowers are tiny, you can see them right here. I'm not getting much fragrant right now because we're kind of early in the day, but give a warm afternoon in the fall, winter, or spring, this will bloom from almost September through April. And the perfume will just waft through your garden. So, but tea olive is a wonderful plant for hedges. You can plant one as a focal point. You can use them as a screen. They are good in shade. They're good in sun. This one's in full sun. I grow them in full shade in my garden. But tea olive is a must-have if you're a southern gardener, and it gives you that wonderful, and it's kind of like an apricot fragrance that will really bring in the neighbors, because when it will kind of go through your neighborhood. And I've seen it in my parents' garden where the neighbor was coming through trying to figure out what was smelling, and you don't really see the blooms, but you can certainly smell them. but tea olive, a wonderful plant for central Alabama. Now we've got a camellia. This is Camellia sasanqua. Now there's tons of cultivars of sasanqua. The sasanquas are known for blooming in the fall. They will start blooming as early as probably September and can go on into December, maybe around New Year's. And then your japonicas are your more winter varieties. But I like the fall bloomers and the fact that they give you some color at the end when a lot of plants look tired after the summer heat. This is a nice cultivar that's blooming a nice pink, and unfortunately I don't have a name on this one, and that happens a lot. When you buy camellias, sometimes they're just sold as Camellia sasanqua. This one tends to bloom a little bit earlier. There's some other varieties like Yuletide that bloom a little bit later and will be red. There's one blooming now called Snow Flurry, one called Mini no Yuki that are white, but they come in a range of colors from white to pink to red and a combination of any of those colors. But Camellia sasanqua, and of course camellia, I would not garden without a camellia because we want color in the winter, we want color in the fall when a lot of plants are not blooming. So this one gives you a great color. Let's walk over here and take a look at another shrub. This is Buttercup witch hazel. It is a spring blooming plant. The flowers are kind of a buttery yellow, very, very fragrant, and they will come on before the foliage, so you get a nice display of flowers. It will come and into bloom kind of early, maybe late February through March. And then now you see we're starting to get a little bit of fall color. This will give you a little bit of a yellowish color, but it's a wonderful plant to add, especially in a woodland garden. It can take some shade and blooms in the shade, but we've got it growing here in some sun. Corylus is the genus on this, and it is pauciflora is the species, which means little flower. And they are little, but they put in a big pack when it comes into fragrance. Here we are with another Japanese maple variety, Shiranami. And the reason I like to grow this one is it's pretty tough. It's pretty heat tolerant. You know, it's out here in full sun in the sensory garden, and it looks pretty good. It's got a nice a green color foliage. It kind of comes out a nice reddish bronze, but it will give us a good fall color, and we're just starting to see a little peak of fall color with that red and orange coming in on the leaf. Now the reason I like this one is that it's pretty tough. It's vigorous. It's a good one for the deep south, and it's a robust tree. So it's a nice variety to include. Shiranami, it's an older variety as well. And underneath it, we've got another Camellia sasanqua, and we've got the camellias that are coming in bloom. And I mentioned that they bloom in the fall. This variety, Shishigashira, is another Japanese name, but which means lion's head, and it is a dwarf variety that tends to stay about 4 to 5 feet max, and you can even keep it pruned lower. So if you need a camellia for your foundation that stays low, Shishigashira is the one to use. Also, we can see that the garden doesn't always look perfect, and we've got a plant here that is flat on its back. This is pineapple lily, or eucomis, and it produces these wonderful spikes of pineapple looking flowers. But as you can see, this late in the summer, it's tired, it's done its thing, it's ready to go to sleep. We'll probably come in and cut this foliage off and put it to rest for the rest of the season. This is a South African bulb that we can grow in most gardens here. It's good in zone 7 and zone 8 and zone 9, and it makes a wonderful plant when it's in its prime and floral display. Now we're looking at fire spike. This is a tropical perennial. The genus name is Odontonema, but it has these wonderful red flowers late summer and fall that are highly attractive to butterflies. I see a lot of sulfurs that tend to fly around and love to visit each of the spikes, and that's where it gets its name, fire spike, with those tall spikes of bright red flowers. There's also a pink form too that gets a little bit taller, but both of them are in the genus Odontonema. and are probably zone 8 perennials, but do well in our climate and probably warmer even further south. It just loves the heat and humidity and does well in our summers. Next to it, as you look to the left, is Mexican marigold. This is Tagetes lemonii. This is a great little plant. This is something we've just newly planted in the garden. It may be a little sensitive in the winter to kind of drainage, but we've got it in this raised bed. It wants to bloom late summer and through to the winter, and I guess we'll see how long it lasts. This is kind of a new one for me, but I'm hoping it'll be a good display. I love the bright yellow blooms, and the foliage is so aromatic, and you can almost get a licorice fragrance from the foliage if you crush it just a little bit. I'm standing in front of another really nice Japanese maple, and this one is Murasaki Kiyohime. And Murasaki means purple, and anytime you hear hime in the name of a Japanese maple, it's usually going to refer to a dwarf or smaller version, and it comes from the word hime. Of course, I'm not really good in Japanese, so but it means princess, and it talks about a smaller form or a dwarf form. But this one makes a nice rounded specimen. The foliage comes out a nice green with a kind of a purpley red edge. Then the fall color will come in as a nice mixture of gold and red, and it just makes a nice, almost just a complete dome, a tight dome, and it would be good in rock gardens. It's also good for bonsai. Next to it, we've got the golden thread cypress. These are a conifer, which means they're going to stay green, and these have a nice texture to them with that weeping foliage. I see these used more in northern climates, but they seem to do okay here in central Alabama. They like full sun, and they maintain that gold color throughout the season, and it gets kind of really intense in the winter. It really sticks out in the winter as well. Now, if we look below that, we've got phlox called Wanda, and Wanda is a phlox that just doesn't want to stop blooming during the whole growing season. So starting in the spring through the summer and fall, this phlox, which stays usually below 2 feet, which is nice. It doesn't need staking. It will bloom those pink blooms just throughout the entire growing season, and it seems really tough, and this plant has really won me over as far as just a good tough perennial for the garden. This is an interesting plant called firecracker plant, and that certainly fits the description of the plant. Look at those red blooms just kind of bursting out. This is a plant that's more typical as you get down in zone 9 and 10, but we've put it in the ground here, and it makes a perennial unless we get a really cold winter. So I always make sure I get a few cuttings, put in the greenhouse just in case we lose it. But I like to include it in our sensory garden, one, because this beautiful display of foliage, but also the texture of those leaves that are just really unique, almost like just green stems. But Russellia is the genus, and firecracker plant, and it makes a great container plant as well. So if you want to grow this and you can move it inside during the winter and not worry about losing it, and it will stay green, just keep it in a sunny place. But next to it, offsetting that rich orangey red, is the blue foliage of the weeping Atlas cedar. And this is another conifer. This makes a tree that is pendulous, but you kind of have to train it the direction. It just wants to kind of flop and spread and weep, but it is a nice conifer that gives you a great architectural style in the garden with the form of the plant, and just very unusual. And that blue color with those soft needles just really give a nice enhancement, especially in the winter when a lot of plants are deciduous. This is going to remain evergreen, being a conifer. One of the things we have here at Longleaf is a collection of hardy ornamental bananas. And we tried one year, we had a nice edible plant garden here, and we planted all the different types of vegetables and different things, and the deer ate everything but the bananas. So I said, I'll fix that. And we planted a variety of different bananas. And this is probably one of the coolest ones. This is a variety called Tani. It's a Musa balbesiana. And of course, that doesn't mean a lot to you. It's just an ornamental banana. But what's different about this one is that it's variegated, which means it has white patterns of missing chlorophyll in the foliage, which makes it highly ornamental. So, but this is Musa Tani. Now this one we grow more for the foliage, and when I say ornamental banana, a lot of these bananas actually flower and produce fruit, but the fruit either has seed or they don't produce fruit, and we grow them just for the foliage effect. And this is one, it will bloom and produce fruit, but it doesn't bloom a lot, but it will have a lot of different pups that come out with a different degree of variegation. And some of that variegation, some will come out all white, and those usually won't make it, but and some will come out all green, and I will cut those off to keep those from taking over, so we maintain that variegation. Now these took a beating in our recent hurricane Zeta. We had 60, 70 mile an hour winds on some of the areas around here, and it shredded the leaves, so they look a little worn today, but normally that foliage is really, really nice. And as you can see, we've got a variety of bananas, and you can pick one that suits the size you need. We've got some that only get 4 to 5 feet, like the Chinese yellow banana. We've got the Abyssinian banana, which is really, it's not in the genus Musa, it's an Onsettia, and these will get quite large, and they're kind of marginal in this area, but I know a lot of people that just pop them up, cut the foliage off, and put them in the basement or under the house, and plant them back in the spring. But really the favorite bananas are the ones, the ornata or the ornata hybrids, that produce these colorful blooms that can be red to purple to pink and to even orange, and you get this incredible mix of tropical colors. And you'll even see some of the lavender blooms. But these will produce a banana that's full of seed. I've actually grown these from seed, and we sell the plants here at the nursery at Longleaf, and they even will cross. I've collected seeds that were produced hybrid plants. But ornamentals bananas are great in the landscape. They give you this wonderful textural foliage effect. They can produce a summer shade in areas like if you've got a patio or a sitting area where you want some shade in the summer, and that foliage kind of gives you a cool greening effect. And then in the winter you're going to have to cut these down, and they will reemerge back in the spring when the weather warms. But if you're going to grow bananas now, you're going to need good soil. They love compost, they love water, and they love fertilizer, and you really need those in order to keep them looking healthy. And of course we've done this here in this bed. We've put in a lot of compost, and we've really we put the fertilizer to them, and the bananas are quite happy. But if you want a good tropical look, a good summer look, try some of these different ornamental banana species. This is an interesting bed, and this kind of came out of sometimes when we're gardening, you just kind of make solutions out of the issues at hand. And we had a nice tropical bed, and as I was planting the bed, it was probably sometime in July by the time I got this bed planted. And it was hot in July, and we have a hose over here for irrigation, and it only reaches so far. So this bed ended up being drought tolerant plants. So what I decided is, since it was kind of at the far end of the property and it was that late in the season, it kind of made sense. So in your areas or beds that are pretty distant from your water source, utilize drought tolerant plants, and that's exactly what we've done in this bed. There are oleanders here that bloom in the summer, and I love oleander. It's a tough drought tolerant plant. Comes in a variety of colors, and there's certain varieties that are hardy here in central Alabama, like your hardy red, your hardy pink, and your double yellow. Now some of the other doubles are not so hardy, but these do quite well. We've also got our native erythrina, which is related to legumes. This is a coral tree, or Cherokee bean is the other name. This is native kind of in central Alabama, and it especially gets common as you go further south and along the coast. It produces these bright cardinal red clusters of blooms, and the hummingbirds will circle this and adore it. It is thorny, but I love the actual texture of the foliage on this. We added another oleander, as you can see, and we've also got some agaves in here. And if you look down below, we've got the whale tongue agave, which is agave ovatifolia. And these were tiny little plants I just planted as 4-inch pots, and they've done quite well. As you look over, we've also added some Gerber daisies and another species of coral bean. This is one that's kind of not usually grown in Alabama. This is Erythrina flabelliformis, the Arizona coral tree, and the flowers on it are an incredible neon orange, and it will produce those flowers at the top of each stem. But we've underplanted these Garvinia form Gerber daisies to kind of fill in with some color, and they've done quite well. I think they're pretty tough. You can see we've got some nice pink blooms, and these come in a variety of colors. But they kind of remind me of turnip greens with daisies stuck in them, but make a great perennial here in central Alabama. Now here we are looking at the tropical cascade garden, and we have a nice waterfall that gives a nice sound, a nice peaceful sound to the garden. But around this waterfall we've planted a variety of tropical perennials, and this includes the angel trumpets, which are Brugmansia, which have the nice trumpet shaped blooms, and those come in a variety of colors of white to pink to yellow and orange. We've also got some ginger lilies and some other ornamental banana species. We also have a variety of elephant ears, including one called teacups, and actually the flower the foliage is shaped to hold water, and when it rains it will fill with water, and as it gets heavy it will gently dip over and pour that water out, so it makes a nice little kinetic sculpture. We've also got some morning glory trees in there, and a lot of these plants are summer bloomers, so we have a really nice looking garden in the summer. But what happens is after frost and we get cold, a lot of these things are dormant, and so we look forward to having this during our summer months. And the reason we've gone with perennials here, this is going to be an area that's going to be expanded eventually, so we really don't want to put any trees or shrubs in here at the moment, because we're going to have to remove all this stuff once that time comes. So we've got to focus on tropical perennials. As you can see, there's some repeats of some things we've got around the grounds. Your Malva viscus, and we've even got some lemongrass to give a nice texture, and some other different things, including a small pollinator garden in the foreground, which has some of your salvias, and including Salvia darcii, which is the cardinal sage, and your Santa Barbara sage, which is another species of salvia, and we've got Amsonia. Now we're into November here, so things are kind of going dormant and beginning to die down, but we know this garden will emerge in the spring with a beautiful burst of new growth and some color. Now, one of the plants that we've got a great collection of here at Longleaf is what we call ginger lilies, or in the genus Hedychium. And the ginger lilies, often called butterfly gingers, because the flowers kind of resemble a butterfly in shape. But we've amassed quite a collection of different hybrids and species here, and I guess that's because, one, I love these. They are tough, they're easy to grow as long as you give them what they need. They love good soil, a lot of compost and regular water, but they are easy to grow. There's not a lot of pests or diseases that bother them, and the fragrance on these, the flowers are showy and the fragrance is wonderful. Now we're looking at one here. Now I was actually in Hawaii many years ago, and we got a whole collection from Waimea Botanical Garden, and this is some of their collections that we planted here on site. They had a collection of hybrids that they had amassed from Japan and some from Hawaii, so they actually do well here, and when we get a frost hard freeze. They'll freeze down, but they come back and we get them blooming starting in about June, July with some of the early varieties, but September and October is probably the best time. But here we are in November. We've still got some blooms on these, and they make a wonderful addition to the garden. They like to be divided every so often. They tend to get a little bit crowded, but you can pop them up, share them with your friends, and we sell them here at Longleaf at our plant sales. But the ginger lily is a wonderful addition to the garden, especially if you love that nice fragrance to permeate through your landscape. All right, I'm standing in front of one of the coolest plants here, if you ask me. It's a rare plant in the fact that it comes from a country that is hard to travel to. This is a Mazari palm, or the Nanorops ricciana, from Afghanistan. So the plant being from Afghanistan is hard to get the seeds, and what happens with this palm, it's monocarpic, which means once it blooms, that main stem dies. So getting seeds for the plant is hard to get in the United States, and it's kind of a popular plant among palm growers because it's so cold hardy. And this palm was originally growing in downtown Anniston. I planted it probably 20-something years ago, and I grew it from a little plant, but we ended up moving it here to the Botanical Gardens, and it almost died. But it has rebounded nicely, and it has this really stiff blue leaves, and it's very cold hardy. It's been out here and exposed to all the winters that we get, but being from Afghanistan, it's also drought tolerant. So, but it's done pretty well the winter rains that we get. So if you want to see an unusual plant that's native to Afghanistan, and it also occurs in some of the other countries, and there's different selections of it or subspecies, but this is a cool palm to have around because it's so unusual. It's your Mazari palm, the Nanorops ricciana. All right, that kind of concludes our tour of the gardens, but I wanted to mention the gardens around the Longleaf really include the whole campus here. I'm here in the courtyard at the Anniston Museum of Natural History. We have a tropical courtyard. We also have a wildlife garden featuring native plants. We also have plantings of xeriscape gardens over at the Berman Museum. So when you come and visit the gardens, it encompasses the whole campus. And you can see we've got a wonderful space here where we've utilized to create this tropical landscape in this protected environment. So when you come and visit, not just the Longleaf, check out the other landscapes as well. We'd love to see you visit here at Longleaf Botanical Gardens.